Hi friends, thank you for tuning into today's video. It's a pleasure to have you here, and it's also a pleasure to be able to share with you my spiritual journey, and hopefully I can offer some help and insights along the way. So today I wanted to share with you my first ever experience awakening to infinite love. Now, one of the beauties of this path of exploring consciousness is that you start to taste the infinite different flavors that the universe has to offer. And one of the more sweeter flavors the universe has to offer is the awakening to infinite love. And it's quite common awakening to have. You can obviously read other reports about the same insight. But I think it's important to share, and also it'd be nice to explain what happened to me and how it's changed my life. So it first happened when I was in my very early 20s, and I was living with a shaman at the time for a brief period of time. And he was holding ceremonies in our flat in the centre of London. And one day when I was feeling a bit ill, he knocked on my door and he invited me to come down and experience this ceremony for the first time. And I was like, you know what, let's give it a go. And essentially we tried smokable ayahuasca, and it's called Changa. And obviously this first awakening was brought on through psychedelics. And I think it's good to have a very profound awakening to infinite love sometimes, because the reason why it's good, and this is what happened to me, is it gives you a motivation, and also it just shows you the potential of this path and what's actually out there and what the universe has to essentially offer you. And anyway, I ended up trying the psychedelic, and within about a minute I was no longer in my body, and I had essentially become everything at once. And I could see just so clearly how this universe is contained by just pure infinite love. And through this love, it allows reality to be the way it is. So this love is containing reality, and it does so in a way where it just loves whatever happens. So imagine it's a bit like the space of a room or the space of a football pitch. It doesn't try and stop what's going on the pitch. It just contains it, right? And for reality to exist the way it exists, it has to have this love element to it for it to be able to unfold with infinite possibility. And if it was to be any other way, it just could never work. And to see this magnificence, and also to feel and see that this love, funny enough, was also our true nature, because I was no longer myself, I was this love. And it exists right behind our eyes right now in this moment as I'm speaking. And to have this experience is extremely profound, and it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it, and I was like, wow, I want more of that. You know, when you come down, and it's astounding how quickly the mind essentially contracts itself if you have that experience, especially if you're on psychedelics. The mind can expand and it contracts really fast. And obviously in my head I was like, oh, okay, this is something that's worth exploring. So I fast forward a bit, maybe a year later. I wanted to find remedies to some of the issues that was going on in my life, because my life started to get a bit topsy-turvy. So I started to explore deep meditation. And I remember my first ever meditation retreat, I actually reawoke to this understanding in, I'd say, a little bit of a more subtle way, where I was eating some food, and I suddenly could see that same realization that I had that year before. I could see infinite love now existing right now in my direct experience, and how it was containing everything and how it was my true nature. And it's really interesting, because when you awake to this insight, everything that you ever wanted just dissolves, like all your hopes, all your dreams. But then along with that, everything else dissolves too. So all your anxieties, all your worries, all your fears, all your traumas. And in that moment, I basically became fully liberated from the shackles of being a body mind. And I essentially could have died in that moment, and it wouldn't have mattered. It didn't matter anymore. And it's hard to move actually a little bit sometimes in that I don't want to call it a state, but in that realization. And I could see how it's right here, right now, right behind the eyes. It's here, right now. And all we've got to do is just become more attuned to what we're experiencing right now in front of us, because our minds is the vessel essentially that consciousness uses to understand and explore itself. So we have to train our mind to become more perceptive to what we are experiencing on a moment-to-moment basis. And the more we fine-tune that, the more we can see. It's a bit like turning a light on in a room. If you slowly turn it on, you'll start to see more and more of the true nature of the reality of the room, and you'll start to see this love existing. Obviously, it completely fills up the body with gratitude, hope, and I realized in that moment, I was like, everything I ever needed is right here, and it's deeply satisfying, and a huge weight of suffering just disappeared in that very moment. And it's interesting to contrast it to the psychedelic experience, where the psychedelic experience was probably more intense, but it didn't have more of a deeper impact necessarily on my psyche, but maybe both experiences were working in tandem with each other to kind of heal this vessel that I'm using now. So obviously this insight and this, realization does wear off, in a sense that, the darkness or the light can turn off again, and that's fine, and me knowing that existed was all I needed to kind of motivate me on this path and realize, wow, this is really something worth pursuing. Because sometimes when you hear about enlightenment, you hear about spirituality, it can become a bit hazy, and of course you hear people talking about all these kind of mystical experiences, and sometimes you're like, does this actually exist? You can have doubt, and it's great to have these experiences, because then not only can you share them and basically offer hope to the world, because if this is our true nature, then everyone has the potential to realize this. We just need to do the right means to get to the insight. But anyway, of course, this really was like a leveling up to my spiritual journey. So once this happened, I took this part of my life a lot more seriously, because I knew the benefit it could have. And still to this day, it's having profound effects. Those two realizations in those two moments. Because if I ever get a little bit out of whack in my life, I know where I need to return to, right? So obviously in more videos we can in other videos we can explore the healing nature of this understanding, because ultimately also what I realized in this moment, that love is the greatest healer. So to fully heal, to fully heal our nervous system, to fully heal our mind, our trauma, our karma, we're going to have to bring this realization of love into our lives and allow it to just dissolve all the untruths. Just allow them to come up, and in the light of love, all of them will go. Takes a long time, of course. So thank you for tuning into this video. I hope it helps, and we'll talk more about it in the next video, hopefully. So it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'll speak to you soon.